Mr. Simmons, I presume.
Who are you?
I am called the Keeper, a child of the green world. I speak for the Emerald Parliament. Do not bother to struggle. The powers of hell have no purchase here. Your podcast is entirely in our hands.
What's happening, Hellspawn? Welcome back to another episode of Spawnography with me, your co-host, George Marston. Pronouns they, them, or she, her. And with me, as always, is...
Pierce Lyden, pronouns they, them. How you doing, George?
You know, ups and downs. Just a little anxious because I'm having my wisdom teeth out tomorrow. My upper wisdom teeth. And it's, I don't think it'll be fun. My dentist is the rock and roll dentist. He told me he has a collection of very expensive signed guitars. He's like 67 years old or something. He's been in town for like 40 years practicing, basically as long as I've been alive. The first time I saw him, he told me he had guitars signed by all of the original Ramones and by Led Zeppelin.
Whoa.
Which I mean, the stereotype about dentists is that they collect expensive guitars. So
is it?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
Does he also have a room painted like Eddie Van Halen's guitar?
He probably does. Like the blues dentist or the blues lawyer is a real thing. It is a guitar collecting stereotype. But yeah, so I think he usually, honestly, he's a pretty good dentist. I like him better than my last dentist, and I think it'll be fine. One thing I'm looking forward to about it is that my roommate has been watching Breaking Bad for the first time.
Mm-hmm.
And he's almost done. He's watching the 5th season right now. And I've seen it before. So I haven't seen Better Call Saul. So I think we're going to binge that after, like when I'm just laying on the couch with my teeth all messed up. Sometimes I think the best way to rewatch a show is if your roommate who hasn't seen it is just watching it, and you kind of wander into the room and catch like 2 episodes and like watch the best part and watch them react to it. And then you can go do another thing and come back or whatever.
See, sometimes sometimes I'd rather people that, especially if I recommend something, I'm like, just watch it on your own, because I also don't want to be like just looking over the whole time, like waiting.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Well, that's why you can only come in and out, or like stand there like a dad, like watching the TV with your arms crossed, like behind, like out of the sight line. Like, but yeah, you got to be careful because like I also keep forgetting where things are. So I'll come out and I think it'll be a scene from like season 4, and it's like before that. So I'll have to be like, has Gus been off screen for a while?
Trying not to spoil, but also trying to like figure out where you are.
Yeah, exactly. Because of course he'll either be like, oh, he got fucking whacked or whatever if that part's happened, or he'll be like, yeah, he's kind of hasn't shown up again in a little bit, which is what happened when I asked that. So yeah,
congratulations on getting to watch Better Call Saul while you're in recovery.
Yeah, exactly. My mom literally made me like 2 pounds of mashed potatoes.
Nice.
So they're doing my laundry today. She was like, help me mash these for you to take home and eat all week. I also live like 1 minute away from a smoothie place, so I think I'll be fine.
Yeah. No solid foods for you for a little.
Well, on that note, we'll talk about someone who hasn't eaten solid foods in at least years at this point. That, of course, being Al Simmons, #1 Hellspawn, or is he anymore? We don't know exactly what happened after last issue, where he was cast into a void and went through a strange, thorny, spirally portal to meet his judgment.
Yep. All right, I'm going to get right into the credits. This is Spawn number 75. Ooh, big
Yeah,
milestone issue, kind of.
That's
Mini
true. Well,
milestone.
it marks exactly halfway through the second compendium. So if you're reading along in compendiums, or if you're curious about where that would put you, that's the way I'm reading it. I am now officially over exactly at the halfway mark, past the halfway mark in compendium 2. I have compendium 3 on the way. So it does feel like a big milestone. We'll talk about that a little bit, but go ahead.
Hell yeah. This is Todd McFarlane and Image Comics presents Sacred Ground. Story by Todd McFarlane and Brian Holguin. Pencils by Greg Capullo. Inks by Danny Miki, with a special thanks to Scott Dude Kobayashi.
Hell yeah.
Copy editor and lettering by Tom Warzakowski. Colors by Brian Haberlin, Dan Kemp, and Tyson Wengler. Cover art by Greg Capullo and Todd McFarlane. Dedicated to Eddie Vedder.
No shit.
Yep. And we'll get into that later on in the back matter.
Oh, we sure will.
Yeah.
We sure will. Oh, I just remembered something you showed me before we started recording, and yeah.
We got a lot to get into later on. So I'll do the Spawn number 74 summary. Sam and Twitch ponder the results of their research on Lieutenant Colonel Al Simmons. Meanwhile, Spawn continues to battle the heap until he ends up engulfed by the mass of trash just as Cog and Bootsy arrive to save him. When Bootsy kneels to pray for help, he finds the sigil of the Hellspawn, a token signifying that Spawn is indeed gone. Elsewhere, Spawn falls into a dark space where the former Eddie Beckett awaits for him and points him toward a light source and where he is welcomed home. So we're going to open this up. I kind of like this opening sequence. We get 6 panels of this tangled portal sort of opening.
I love it.
Yeah, it's really cool.
It's also minimalist. Go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say it's very minimalist. We've already said this a bunch of times, but it does feel like Holguin taking the baton a little bit and being like, I know how to give this a vibe that works. I really love in these panels that we get to see Spawn traveling through this thing.
That's
you can see his silhouette.
It's all the silhouette, and I love how his cape silhouette merges with the thorns, and then the curvature, that spiral of the thorns becomes like that, the bat shape.
Yeah.
Really works. And honestly, looking at a page like this that's just a silhouette, it's immediately clear why Greg Capullo became Mr. Batman for about 10 years.
Yeah, so we're in this kind of new space, and I like the narration here. Passing beyond the veils of life and death, moving towards the dawning light, leaving the fading shadows of the past behind. Is this how it feels? And then we kind of open to the next page. Big splash with these weird lemurs and Spawn.
Yeah, the lemurs. I love it.
And Spawn on this like grassy knoll, saying to be born again.
This knoll thing, he often winds up standing on one of these when he's about to encounter something important in his life. Like when he got torn apart by the curse and his body was changed and remade, the house was perched on one of these. It's just a visual theme that seems to come up at the most dramatic moments. This like kind of almost Jack Skellington-esque, like perched out on a cliff thing. Relevant to the so-called back matter, which we'll discuss later as well. But it's a visual cue of Spawn standing on this, but I like that this time it's the lush, verdant environment. You can see the remnants of the portal. It's a great splash page.
Yeah, looks really great. Again, these lemurs are insane.
I know,
but
they're adorable.
That's fine.
Greg Capullo had a great time.
So weird. Such a weird little detail. So Spawn's got but Spawn also has his sigil. So the same, or seemingly the same sigil that Bootsy has. Spawn has a version of it as well, and he's kind of just wanders through. I love his footsteps,
leaving
with
the
his
like
one
steaming
big boot.
steps. That reminds me of these books, the Enchanted Forest Chronicles, by I want to say Patricia C. Reed. Wrede, which was about wizards and dragons and shit. But the wizards in the book are like evil sorcerers, and everywhere they go, they suck up life force for their spells. And it just immediately, like, they walk through the forest and it like leaves like dead, decaying footprints, and that's how they know where they've been.
Cool.
Great books for a kid, but it just reminded me of that.
Yeah.
And I love that.
And he's just kind of wandering through. He's talking to nobody, but he's talking to himself and saying, like, I don't understand. Is this heaven? Because again, it's this like lush environment, very different than hell on every level.
Yes.
Until the earth comes up to grab him, and a voice says, "This is not heaven. This is paradise, and you're a viper in our garden."
Love this whole sequence. I love that caption because, of course, it evokes, Eden, the Garden of Eden, and the viper, which, depending on your theology, was either God or Satan or both or whatever. It certainly is temptation, and it represents sin in a lot of our collective unconscious of mythological, fabled thought. And in this case, I really like how it's used because I like how heaven isn't paradise. God created paradise on earth and left heaven to the angels. And we'll talk about that because that becomes a theme throughout this issue where Spawn faces a certain type of reckoning. And we learn a lot more about that third side in the fight between heaven and hell that's been kind of foretold. Also love the drawing of Spawn getting wrapped up in the blackened, like, craggy thorns that sort of really contradict his chains. And the other thing, when we have seen heaven before, it's been very sterile and very like bureaucratic and very like organized and ordered. This is
Elysium looks crazy, but like it looks like an Apple store a little bit.
Right. It's not verdant growth of like living lush like plants and stuff, because God didn't seed plants in heaven. He seeded them on earth. He put the beasts of the ground and the plants of the dirt on the earth. That's very specifically part of the Bible. And again, depending on your theology, really has a lot to do with how hell was formed and why, because Lucifer and other angels really hated and envied man. Yeah. And so it's kind of interesting to put that as the third side between heaven and hell. And again, we'll get into that. But before we do that, we have to crack-a-thoom our way back to Earth, where there is a massive thunderstorm sweeping through the streets of New York City, a real rain washing away all the dirt and the filth, as our good friend Travis Bickle would say.
And also, this in great contrast to the heat wave that had just happened, too.
Yes.
This is basically the exact opposite.
In a way, if you living in the South, a heat wave often portends a thunderstorm in a lot of ways because of the humidity buildup. Here, it's very humid. There are a lot of summer thunderstorms, and we'll often get like the heat lightning and stuff when it's not even raining, but we'll see lightning and thunder in the sky. In this case, it is a torrential downpour that seems to be an omen, because as Bootsy and Cog are arguing about, Al's disappearance and his apparent death, or being taken off the board at least, means that the final fated battle between heaven and hell is about to begin.
I gotta say, I do really love the art on this page. The inking's excellent. The renderings here are really good.
Yeah.
Really just great stuff. I'll forgive the computer lightning.
I don't mind it. It's only in that one panel, and I will say I got to give it up to our good friend of the pod, Tom Orzechowski. Hopefully, I don't care. Beloved of the pod, Tom Orzechowski, Orzechowski, for the crack-a-thoom, a good old classic Silver Agey style Thor-ish, like Thundercrack. Boy, I tripped over my tongue so much in that. Anyway, I like all the rendering throughout this whole sequence where Bootsy and Cog are arguing about what's happening. Cog is like, listen, bud, I don't know how to tell you this, but even though I know a lot about what's going on, the war between heaven and hell, that's way beyond my pay grade. I can't do anything to stop it, especially if Al's gone. That's written in stone. He says that.
I like that this conversation and sort of Bootsy's emergence as an angel has put Cog on the back foot a little bit, in the sense that in this interaction, Bootsy kind of takes on Cog's normal role, and
Yeah,
Cog is kind of like Al,
yeah,
where he's like, "Well, I don't know," and Bootsy just has to be like, "Shut up! Like, let me.
yeah,
I'm doing something,"
yeah. I'm doing a thing.
And it's interesting because we don't often see Cog not floundering, but like,
Well, he's usually the one trying desperately to spur Al into some kind of meaningful action,
right,
while Al is caught up on picking up the shattered pieces of his perceived former life. But in this case, Bootsy is kind of scrying on the sigil, the Hellspawn sigil, and he's like, "Look, you don't get it. That's just it. He's not dead. He's gone. That heap swallowed him up, and he's gone. He's not in heaven or hell."
right,
And Cog is like, "Well, that's weird as fuck." Just as Bobby shows up, and he's like, "Me and all the other night folks, the night people, we got washed out of our cardboard shanties. We got nowhere to go." And Bootsy's just like, "Hey, have you made peace with God? Because you need to get the affairs of your soul in order soon." And
Have you
Bobby's like,
accepted Jesus Christ as your personal Lord and Savior? No, but I
"Yeah,
love His work.
yeah, exactly." And Bobby's like, "I don't know what the fuck you're talking about, but you sound crazy right now." Meanwhile, in quote unquote suburban Queens again, in your neck of the woods,
Yeah,
literally, Cyan is having kind of a seizure, saying, please come back," and gripping her soother as the lightning and thunder and torrential rain form a very chilling kind of backdrop for this very scary moment for Terry and Wanda. And once again, it's kind of the same thing we saw last time, was the build up to this,
hmm
where she was like, the sad man is gone.
hmm
And it's a very brief but effective check-in, kind of showing just all the people who really have a very important connection to Al, especially Cyan, who has this kind of intrinsic connection to him now that he has used magic basically to soothe her trauma
right.
from being kidnapped by Clown, are all suffering from his disappearance in a way that hasn't even happened when he's been sent to hell before.
Right. And that leads us right into what we opened the issue with, where we learn where we are, which is the green world. And we meet the keeper. We meet the Lorax of the green world.
Yes, he's part of the Emerald Parliament. He literally says,
He
"I
speaks
speak for the trees."
trees.
But Al is wrapped up in the thorns in the Jesus Christ pose,
Yep.
basically like on a
Like
thorny cross,
crucified.
which will be spelled out in a moment.
I mean, it's on the cover. The cover is this.
Yes, exactly.
It's him it's him naked with his cape in tatters around him, a crown of thorns upon his head, and he's just like bleeding necroplasm.
I have two things to say here. One, I feel like the design of the keeper could be more interesting. It's kind of standard. I like the antlers, but like I wish he had like, I don't know, like a deer head or something like that, would be like a stag's head, or I don't know. They could have pushed it a little further.
I like that he's got a little leaf over his junk.
I do like the rendering of him. Clearly designed with the potential of a toy in mind.
Oh yeah.
Which, you know, kind of everything in Spawn is, and in the way that we love about comics. I don't know if I've told this story in the pod before, and you'll tell me if I have, maybe. But when I was a kid, about 9 years old, my dad and my stepmom are very religious. They have been since my dad met my stepmom and became very religious just a couple years before this. I had to be 9 or 10. I used to go to church with them. I would stay with my dad every other weekend, one of those kind of things. And he would take us to church on Sundays. Well, this time, it happened to be Easter Sunday. And so, of course, it was a big deal. Or maybe it was Palm Sunday. It was one or the other. I think it was Palm Sunday because we had palms.
Okay.
But there was a contest, an art contest for all the kids in the congregation to draw a religious Easter related image, related to Jesus, of course, and I guess the return or whatever And there was a contest. So I was like, oh, perfect. I love art. I'm an artist. I got my big yellow poster board, like a full size poster board. I got my fucking markers. I used blue markers and a lot of red markers. And I drew Jesus crucified on the cross
Oh boy.
with a centurion stabbing him with a bunch of blood gushing out of his side, like a torrential, like shining elevators worth of like blood. And Jesus is saying in a word balloon, God, why have you forsaken me? And I did not win the contest. My dad was like, well, that is from the Bible.
Yeah. I mean, you followed the instructions. You understood the assignment.
But if you can imagine like a 9-year-old's demented poster board, they did not keep it. It did not hang around. I think it got left at the church and thrown away probably.
They didn't hang it on the refrigerator?
No, they didn't take up the entire refrigerator with the poster of Jesus on the cross. Anyway, that's just a little bit of the nostalgia in this episode, because by the end of this, we're going to get into a lot of it. 4 shadowing, 5 shadowing, 6 shadowing,
7 shadowing.
That's right.
So
anyway, yes.
The keeper says this silly childish war between heaven and hell does not concern us, that you have chosen Our Lady as the site of your battle does. So obviously he's referring to Mother Earth.
Yes.
That is why when the doors of heaven and hell passed over each other, we sent the creature to fetch you. Now, the thing about this that is confusing is that I guess the necroplasm, though, is from Spawn.
Right. Well, I think the idea here is, go ahead, and I'll opine afterwards.
It feels like a thing that the necroplasm did, and not a thing that the Green World or Mother Earth or the Keeper did. So, yeah.
Well, here's my thought on it, and this is me no-prizing a little bit, of course.
Sure.
But just based on what we see, I think Eddie Beckett dies, and because he is not taken by heaven or hell in that moment, the necroplasm that kind of seizes his body has nothing to bond with. So in that moment, the green, because of like the weird cosmological properties of Rat City that we've now learned, kind of seizes the opportunity. And I guess because it says that hell and heaven have no power here, so maybe they just use that as kind of a tool, is kind of my thought. They just kind of like sneak in there when the necroplasm has the reaction with Eddie's body.
Sounds good.
To lay it out, Eddie dies, body has the reaction with the necroplasm. Step 2, necroplasm has nothing to bond with, so it starts bonding with all the like refuse of the Rat City.
Right. And so you're saying that essentially through that, Mother Earth is sort of alerted. And that's part of, because the Keeper's eyes also glow green, similar to Spawn's. So,
right.
And similar to the Heap's mouth. So you're saying that in some of that transference.
Right, because there was no symbiote for the necroplasm in this like animated body to bond with, they took advantage of that like open connection. Okay. That's my thought.
Great. Sounds good to me. So long story short, everything is magic.
It's all magic, and science is whatever we want it to be.
Yeah.
Before we keep going, one very quick note. A lot of the imagery here and the iconography, in addition to being very religious, really matches what we saw back around issue 60 when Spawn was going through hell, where he's being like foisted up on the like evil thing, like the tendril of the like creature. He's going through a very similar reckoning, and I think that speaks partially to the way Todd McFarlane envisions this process of judgment and like the metaphysical aspects. So he's kind of drawing on his very own themes, and I think that is in turn building a language in Spawn of that same kind of thing. Like, this is what a soul experiences.
Yeah, I agree. I think that, and I don't know if I should credit Holguin with this, but it does feel like with his sort of like wanting to streamline things and also be self-referential in a way that's not like remember that thing that happened in issue 5? More so in like a visual language sort of moving for like that. We're adding a whole new character and a whole new realm
it's
here.
a thematic
Right.
repetition.
And
Exactly.
I think that that's really effective to partly to remind readers like, hey, you've kind of seen this before. Do you remember?
Yeah.
And if they don't, they don't. There's not much of a reminder. There's no like reminder except that,
No, it's
back to those
to its
issues. But
credit. To its credit, it references like things that are referenced in the dialogue, but
right,
there's no like, and much like in this previous time, Spawn experiences a
right.
similar thing. There's nothing like that, which could easily have happened at a certain time.
Yeah, lack of captions in this sequence are pretty tantamount. There are basically no captions in this whole beginning. Pretty
Yeah.
much, except for when he's walking around by himself.
We get some captions in a minute though, because the Greenkeeper or whatever basically says you're going to suffer the pain that the earth has suffered due to the war between heaven and hell that has turned people away from caring about the very world they live in, and by making it a battleground for sinners and redemption. And Spawn, the thorns grow all the way through his body, and we're going to get a series of these vertical splash pages. The first of which is fucking gnarly. It's Spawn with the shit just fully growing all through his torso. You can see the tendrils growing in and out of his flesh, growing up through his eye sockets, and then all around him are basically all the main supporting cast and the biggest villains we've seen. There's Jessica Priest, there's Jason Wynn, Overkill, Billy Kincaid, Cygor, Redeemer, fucking the Freak. There's the Curse. There's Bootsy and Bobby and Sam and Twitch. Some of the Curse's little Grinches, his little gremlin guys. I forget what they called them.
Oh yeah, me too.
There's Tremor, Clown, Cog, and of course Terry, Cyan, and Wanda. And it's basically, it says the thorny tendrils and stout taproots burrow into Spawn's plasmic flesh. They trace spiderweb trails to the core of his being, a strange emerald communion. And he's basically just having this understanding for the first time ever of how he truly affects all the things around him and how his presence has affected everything around him in his life.
Yeah. I will say it's been a long time since we've gotten like these big vertical splashes like this.
I was just thinking that they used to be a staple.
Yeah, and so it's kind of nice to go back there, especially as we're recapping history. Also, does Tremor have a Ninja Turtles button?
That might be. It's interesting. He's got. Oh no, I think that's on Clown. By the way, that's like Clown's lapel blending into.
All right, fine. Does Clown have a Ninja Turtles button?
Yeah, it's like a smiley face button with a black band over the eyes, but instead of being censored, it looks like a ninja mask. Yeah. So maybe it is like a slight reference to that. It's fun. A cool button. I would wear that if it was a Ninja Turtles button. That's dope.
The next vertical splash is going to be similar to something we've seen before, where it's Malbolgia and the forces of hell against God and the forces of heaven. We get to see the vampires towards the bottom of the forces of heaven, which is cool. And in the middle is the earth shattering, which is cool.
Yeah, between Malbolgia and the god and her angels. And here we do see like the hosts of like the warrior angels, the seraphim, are all women. And up in the top, it's God, the old lady, her incarnation here. And of course, God has taken many physical forms throughout different theological eras. There's the burning bush. There's the era in which he appeared as omens and signs, maybe even as the snake, as we said, in the Garden of Eden. So here, I guess he's in his grandma era, much like I'm getting ready to head into in my next phase of life. But yeah, and on the other side, it's just all the Fleabiacs and all the creepy goons of hell, all wrapped up in the flames of Malbolgia, and exactly like you said, much like the green force is trying to convey to Spawn now, the earth itself hangs in the balance. and it's shattering. It's falling to pieces because of being the battleground of this terrible war.
And what I really like about this whole sequence is through the captions, what Al is understanding is that this is not just a battleground. It is actually a third force. It is what I like about that in terms of what it means for him is that he was right. That like his initial instinct, which was like, I don't want to be part of this war. Like I don't care about heaven and hell. I don't care to be part of this, that we saw way back at the very beginning of Spawn. He was right to be that way.
Yeah.
There was some justification for it. He didn't know what it was at the time, but he can understand it now.
And here, of course, he's being offered a path forward in a way that is exactly what he's been searching for, a meaningful way to be there for the people he loves and his extended reality by perhaps saving the very world they live on. And this final splash, this double splash, has some important stuff. I'm just going to read these captions, and then I'm going to say what's on the page. So, then a final vision, a radiant figure rising like a phoenix from the ashes of folly, bringing an end to the war between heaven and hell, forging a new peace, a new destiny, a middle path beyond pairs of opposites. And then the visions shimmer and fade like sheets of rain on glass, echoing across worlds. First off, love the caption there. A little bit of that Roy Batty at the end, you know. And I love the art here. You could read this as like an argument for centerism, like moral centerism. But what it's really arguing for here is a path of humanity that focuses on the here and now and living in the world that exists and the world that could be if we let it thrive, rather than focusing on this death cult endgame where in any scenario, everything ends. Whether heaven wins or hell wins, everything ends.
Yeah, I mean, in our current political climate in the United States, it feels pretty relevant, right? In a lot of ways, it feels like we need a third path, right? Because the two that have been offered to us just do not work.
Not in a way of centerism, but in a way of compassion and caring that something is happening to the world now,
right?
To the people in the world now. Yeah. Not what could be best for us after we die, which is the focus too many people have. And we don't talk a lot about, I mean, we make it clear our spiritual beliefs, I think, in a lot of ways. I don't really identify with Christianity, even though I identify a lot with the moral tenets of like Jesus Christ, for example.
Sure. Don't kill people.
Love people, care for each other, make sure we have what we need as a people, seem to be great tenets to me.
Don't eat shrimp.
And all respect to people who have deeply held religious beliefs. For me, my conviction, the thing that I find hard to parse, and that this also seems to speak directly to, is heaven and hell are both death cults. Christianity is a death cult. And I don't mean that in the way that all Christians set out in their life with the intent to die, but they all set out with the intent to die well according to their beliefs so that in death they can reach their true full potential. And I believe that any philosophy that asks you to wait until death to reach full potential is flawed, because we have one moment here and now in our actual lives to try and live it in a way that is meaningful and compassionate and constructive. And I think also when we read some of the stuff, we kind of skimmed over some of the dialogue from the Keeper of the Green. He says to Spawn, what makes you think humans are the only ones with souls? Right. What makes you think your life and your lives are the only ones that matter? Which is a very holistic and I guess, green kind of philosophy, appropriately enough, how we would phrase it now, that really does matter. And I think reflects in some ways, I mean, it gets at something that maybe feels a little Buddhist in a way, that life force is not the sole energy of humans. It's not the sole possession of humans. But it also just speaks to a generalized feeling that I think is reflected here in that third way of we have to care about who we are and what we do while we are these people, while we are
Right.
doing these things, which is what Spawn's been searching for.
And that lines up with what Todd kind of always says about how he's not religious, how he does think that you just kind of do right by people and you kind of figure it out from there.
Yeah.
There's a lot of consistency here. The page itself is really cool. Now we see Malbolgia and God as the old lady, which having God be an old lady in this sequence kind of made me think like, do you think that they wrote this, then got the pages back and were like, man, I wish we made God a little bit cooler?
I don't know, but
But
I
it
kind of
is
like it.
fun. Yeah.
I love this mean mug old lady here on the right side, and on the left side is a perfectly kick-ass, super sick Malbolgia grimace. But what's in the middle is the most interesting and impactful thing, which is Spawn rocketing into the sky with green energy pouring from his hands and gold energy propelling him forth with a halo and huge angel wings.
Yeah. This is Wings of Redemption Spawn, as the toy will come to be known.
Yes, indeed. But this is not the last time we'll see this vision of a Spawn with wings like this.
Right.
Far from it. This is our first glimpse of this image that will actually become incredibly important. The body of a hellspawn with the raiments of an angel and the intent, I guess, of saving the earth rather than saving heaven or hell.
Now, before we get into more of the issue itself, we kind of talked about this before we started. The idea of the green,
yeah,
being a part of this. Now,
the Emerald Parliament. We're calling it the green. I think it's called like the green space or something.
It's called the Green World, but
Green World. That's
this
right.
is just almost not beat for beat Swamp Thing, but it is so Swamp Thing to the point where even there's also the red, which Spawn's cape is red. There is the rot, right?
Right.
Which I guess is like a little bit later that it gets a name, but that's black. That's typically shown as black. He is primarily black and red.
Now, some of that comes a little later.
Yeah, it is. Some of it is later.
The rot, I think, is that's like Jeff Lemire era.
It's from Scott Snyder's run.
Which was concurrent with Jeff Lemire doing Animal Man.
Right.
And the rot became like the crossover thing. Gotta say, pretty much really enjoyed both of those comics for quite a while. Travel Foreman, I think it was, had to quit Animal Man because it scared his mom too much.
I think he said personally it was like not good for his mental health also.
Oh, maybe that's also true. Maybe I'm editorializing on the mom part or misremembering. Yeah. But yeah, he quit because it got too creepy. I loved it for that reason, and I loved his art on it. But also, anyway, so Alan Moore, of course, wrote quite a bit of the stuff with like did he name the green, or was that?
I'm pretty certain that the green and the red are named.
Right.
But the rot doesn't exist as a thing that is named.
The concept of the green and the Parliament of Trees and all of this stuff is, I think, if not entirely created by Alan Moore. I don't want to give him all the credit if he didn't create all of it. We'll look it up. But he at least shaped quite a bit of it. And of course, he also shaped quite a bit of what's going on in Spawn. Now, I don't think he called it, like told, I want you to use the green.
Alan Moore did create the Parliament of Trees.
Okay, good. I thought he at least created that and some other aspects of this mythology.
Yeah.
I think this is just a direct reference to that in the very fun and cool way that a lot of comics did in especially the Bronze era, like the 70s and 80s, before there were really a lot of like official crossovers, where there were like unofficial crossovers. There were things that sort of crossed universes. Mantis, very popular from Guardians of the Galaxy, of course, created by Steve Englehart, who then took the concept of the Celestial Madonna, who was his original version of that character, to another totally different comic company, wrote her under a slightly different name, then came back to Marvel, brought her back and wrote as if she had experienced some of those
All of
things.
that stuff, right?
Yeah, I'm greatly simplifying, but like for the TLDR, but like, yes, which it's just a cool tradition of comics because the people who create them care about each other and care about the stories and also pay homage to each other in this way. You could say this is a ripoff. I think it's an homage. I think it's.
So I do think it's an homage because of the heap specifically. And
right.
The like Swamp Thing is a heap. The heap
But
was the
he's
original
like
Swamp Thing.
Rotted swamp matter. Exactly.
Right. So I do think it is like
technically Man Thing came first.
Before Swamp Thing, but not before the heap.
No, not before.
They're both heaps.
Wait, which heap?
The heap. The original heap came out in like the 30s.
Oh, okay, yes.
The concept of like what Swamp Thing and Man Thing and other heaps and whatever are happened way early on in comics. So I do think that a fun thing is
right. Yes.
Like you're saying, it is all an homage. The Green uses the heap, basically a Swamp Thing, to bring Spawn to the Green world. Okay, cool. Yeah, we're rocking and rolling. We're having fun. I didn't mean to make it seem like I'm like, oh, it's such a ripoff.
No, I didn't think you meant it that way at all. I was just kind of opining on that a little bit. Like, I didn't think you meant it that way. I think you were seeing the like exactly what we were just saying, the like homage and the fun in it.
Yeah,
like it's sly. If you've read it, you know. Also, Swamp Thing was more of a cult comic still at this time. The concept of the red and the green and all that stuff was kind of that was happening as Swamp Thing was moving out of the DC universe in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
So like it wasn't as popularized for, let's say, casual comic readers as it is even now, since that stuff has been brought back into the mainstream DC universe and like repopularized.
And like the really popular TV show.
Yeah, exactly. That everyone watched on the DC Universe streaming service.
Yep. Hey, I had it.
R.I.P. So did I, you know? And it sure had its share of stuff. Harley Quinn show, really excellent. Did not start on that, but it was supposed to.
Yeah.
Anyway, all of that aside, yes, I think you're exactly right to point out the connection with the heap, both the historical connection and the like connection that, you know, in a way, the heap here is its own kind of Rat City-esque Swamp Thing. A guy who dies and is caught up in the refuse of the area that he's in because of this X Factor material. This is a very specific Swamp Thing homage. And, you know, we didn't necessarily touch on it in the last episode because it wasn't quite as obvious until you get in. You know, I think we joked about the Parliament of Trees, the Emerald Coalition or whatever the fuck it is. The Emerald,
Emerald Parliament.
Emerald Parliament. My brain wanted to separate it because it's so close.
Yeah.
But I think it's meant to be read as close because I think in some ways it's meant to be this connective force that transcends realities in the same way that there was that area outside of time and space that we saw way back during the Coco Swiss with the Dave Sim issue where, you know, we saw
a bunch of hands
and Superman,
familiar
not
hands.
Superman. Yeah, exactly. So
I think it's all fun, and it's very in line with what Todd likes to do, which is to pay respects to so many of the creators that make up what the comic book industry is, and then sometimes he dedicates things to Eddie Vedder, but that's fine. Spawn comes off of his tendril vine cross, and the keeper says, "The situation is grave. You're at a crossroads, Hellspawn. You're at the center of this great war, but you are more than they have told you. It is within you to stave off this battle."
Spawn has more questions. What does it mean? What do you want from me?
Yeah, but basically, the keeper is now, we're resetting a little bit, as we tend to do whenever we hit like a milestone issue. We're saying what you thought, everything you thought you knew is wrong.
Or at least there's more to it.
Right, exactly. And whatever, that's great. This is what we love about comic books, right? There's always deeper mysteries to uncover. And with the introduction of the Green World, there's even more. I do love that we get Puppy Dog Eye Spawn here. We haven't had him in a while. And it's nice to see him there.
The Keeper lays it out, though. He says, look, if you have it in you to stop the war between heaven and hell before it destroys Earth, if you don't, we will, by wiping out humanity and erasing the armies and the people and the entire point.
Yeah.
There will be no souls to reap. So we'll save Earth if we have to, if you can't. And he tells him, you will know the soul of your world better now, Hellspawn. I doubt it's a gift you'll be glad of. Which, what a great line.
Yeah, it's cool. And this is going to kind of kick Spawn into a different gear. Meanwhile, this is at the same time this is happening. Bootsy and Cagliostro are yelling at each other basically still in the rain, and Bootsy is getting frustrated again with Cog.
Cog's being sarcastic. He's definitely taking on that Al role here. Bootsy says, do you understand? It's not hell that holds Spawn prisoner. This is Mother Nature striking back. And Cog says, oh, is that all? For a second, I was worried it was something bad. Which just... and Bootsy's just like, straight up, your insolence is not helping. Which, definitely that's how Al would react to Cog in certain conversations. Cog would be like, your soul determines the fate of reality. And he'd be like, oh, is that all? So it's a very
Hellspawn, famously sarcastic. So Cog asks what Bootsy's doing, and he's like, I'm sacrificing for another, something you wouldn't understand. I just pray this works. He's holding the sigil. He says some magic words. He breaks the sigil. Cyan wakes up and says home.
Just as Spawn kind of perks up, we see his puppy dog eyes.
Yep, and Spawn is back in the alley and asking questions. We're right back where we started, baby. But Bootsy and Cog are there, and Cog can't believe that this worked because he's being sarcastic, but it's because he really has been underestimating Bootsy. Yeah. And Bootsy says to Bobby, like, hey, Bobby, like, this is it. I don't have much time. They're coming for me. You taught me to love humanity, not just observe it. You taught me what friendship is. I thank you. Please take care of yourself. Regarding Spawn, folks, David and John had said that Bootsy was going to break our hearts, and yeah,
it really does. I mean, what a great scene! I rarely call back to what I say, like in my little philosophical recommendations or whatever, but it kind of calls back to that. You need to cherish your friends and take the lessons they teach you in their friendship to heart, because you never know when that connection won't be there anymore. And I'm going to say this in a very, let's say, open-hearted and kind way. If you have people in your life who love you and care about you, and they're reaching out to you, who are telling you they want to help you and they can see that you're hurting, don't be afraid to take them up on that. Just don't. And anyway, that's the lesson I learned about friendship.
Yeah.
The lesson that Bootsy learned is that humanity is worth sacrificing for, including making a sacrifice that he makes here, where all of a sudden the host of Seraphim show up. This is a badass looking warrior angel here in her
Seraphic Tribunal.
Yes.
So
the Seraphic Tribunal. And we learn that Bootsy's real name is Belazakal. I did not look up if that's a real angel or not, but...
Belazakal's nothing. It's just this.
Yeah, it's fine. It's a good name. And appropriately enough, Bobby says, Jesus H. Christ, what's going on? And Bootsy, as he's being led away, just says, I did only what I thought was right. I can do no more. And... yeah, I mean, that's really all you can do.
Yeah, and he reminds Spawn as he's being taken away that they're afraid of you. They don't want the war to end. Think back, the deal you made with Malbolgia. How do you know you really made it? And Spawn says, what? I was there. I remember it. And he says, but how do you know? There will come a child, Al Simmons. You must look to the child.
That's right.
Big stuff's happening.
Big stuff's happening. And again... much like when we go back to issue 50, the last big milestone, that's what led into the Jessica Priest stuff. Correct me if I'm wrong, but
in a way, yeah.
Or sorry, issue 50 was what led into the hell. His
That was when,
journey
he
into
goes,
hell,
his journey through hell,
and his
and he
journey
goes
through hell is what led him to the understanding that Jessica Priest, not Chapel, is who killed him.
Right.
So it wasn't in 50, but that's triggered his journey through hell over the next few issues, which is where Malbolgia revealed, like, it's always been my plan. Even the things you think you know, you don't know.
One thing I appreciate is that we did this in like one issue instead of like 6.
Absolutely. For sure. This is a great milestone issue, actually. It feels a lot like moving things along. And we get new questions. We get new stakes. We get new ideas about what's going to be happening. And even if in some ways they function the same, that's what superhero comics are, baby. You get one bad guy out the door, the next one's coming in. You have one existential crisis out the door, the next one's starting. So that's fine. It's enough that they are taking care to ask new questions, set new stakes, make new possibilities for what these stories are going to be like. And most important of all, doing what feels like substantial change to Al, both in how he seems to be able to use his powers, which we'll get to in a minute, and his outlook on where he fits here.
I love this last page. We get kind of a classic black background, but Spawn in the alley with a lot of narration, but I'm pretty into it.
It's great.
Is this how it feels to be cast out of paradise, to be abandoned in a darkness of your own making? Too weak even to stand, Spawn shudders in the dim light of the alleys, the weight of the worlds upon his shoulders. And then the voices come, thousands of voices echoing through his head, full of desperation, fear, hatred. From every corner of the city they scream at him, so many that they threaten to drown him. The keeper's words come back to haunt him. You will know the soul of your world better now, Hellspawn. I doubt it is a gift you will be glad of. The pain of the city is alive. It is calling out to him.
What a great ending page.
Let's go.
There's technically one more page here with 3 talking heads where they talk about the heat wave and how or the thunderstorm that followed the heat wave, how bad it is. People don't have answers for the weather. It's a little bit close to home in a way. This does feel like a broadcast from 2010. And of course, we rounded out with some stories about nuns going crazy and like bankers killing themselves because of the devil, all of which seem to be hinting that like these were the signs of the end times starting.
Right. And that leads us to Spawn number 76. Todd McFarlane and Image Comics present Farewell Dance. Story by Todd McFarlane and Brian Holguin. Pencils by Dwayne Turner. Inks by Danny Miki. Special thanks to Scott Dude Kobayashi. Copy editor and lettering by Tom Warzakowski. Colors by Brian Haberlin, Dan Kemp, Tyson Wengler. Cover art by Greg Capullo and Danny Miki. Dedicated to Korn.
Korn. Oh man, Korn.
We're gonna get
into it. We're gonna get into it. That's like 12 shadowing at this point.
So Dwayne Turner, for those of you that didn't skip the Curse of the Spawn episodes, is the main penciler on Curse of the Spawn. His style is, I'd say, a little closer to like Mark Silvestri than it is to Greg Capullo.
That said, when he inks himself, it's a little different.
True.
And while he's not inking himself here, I want to say this issue looks a lot closer to some of the stuff I've seen him do. Like I looked at the Sovereign 7 was his big book that led him to Spawn. I looked at that and it looks totally different. This looks a little more like that. The blacks are a little chunkier than in Curse of the Spawn. The line work is a little more grounded. It's a little less like scratchy. I will also say the colors here do him a lot more favors.
Yeah, than Curse of the Spawn typically does. Although we're going to get into the flashback sequence of this issue. I understand there's a flashback. I don't really love that it's all sepia toned. We'll get there.
It's this whole issue is basically kind of a reprieve for Spawn.
Yeah.
And sort of a denouement to his spiritual awakening that he is supposedly, or at least hopefully, had in the green. So in the just calling it the green world, whatever, is basically the same thing. He has learned that the pain of the earth is real, and that it will be wrought back on humans if he himself can't stop the war between heaven and hell. But he's also come back with what seems to be like a greater intrinsic connection to, it says the city, but I think it means like the people and things that dwell in the city, the life force that exudes from such a populous place. He's now tied into it.
I think he's really wrestling with what his place really is now, because previously, and like I said before, he was told, well, you're supposed to be a general in Malbolge's army, and that's all you're here for. And he just said, well, I don't want to do that. Now he's learned, all right, you don't have to do that. However, if you don't do something, everything that you do actually care about is gone.
Right.
So figure it out.
Well, I think that's maybe why this feels like a good opportunity for old Al Simmons here to find a greater purpose for himself and for his actions, knowing, I guess he still doesn't know exactly how to stop the war between heaven and hell, but knowing and maybe having this greater understanding of how he interacts with life and living things around him. And Spawn number 76 here is really kind of a parable based around that.
Mm-hmm. It's very contemplative after getting a lot of stuff just thrown at us regarding Spawn's kind of new status quo. This is a moment to sort of breathe, like you said, a respite from that, and gives us, even as readers, a moment to kind of consider what might be Spawn's path moving forward. And on that level, I think it works really well. This first page I love because just Spawn hanging out in a graveyard with the gigantic moon behind him. His Dwayne Turner loves a giant cape. We're going to see it all over.
Oh, yeah.
All over this issue. But Spawn's cape at any given moment is massive, which rules. I just like the shot choice amongst this panel. We're getting some narration here, but there are quotes around it. So we're not totally sure where it's coming from. We know it's not Spawn.
Yeah.
It's really nice. I'm just going to read a little bit of it.
Yeah, go for it.
I wonder what he sees. I wonder how things must look to him since he came back. If this world looks different after you've passed on to the other side, if it's more beautiful, or if it's a disappointment. And I wonder what he sees when he closes his eyes, what it is that haunts him so, what those secrets are that he's so set on keeping to himself. I can't imagine how lonely it must be for him. I suppose I know as much as anyone about living in the dark. I love the close up, that being that's the tip off to who's speaking, but also yes. I love that it is also the close up on his face there. Some excellent inking, some really great textures here.
I love those captions. I think the writing there is great. It does remind me. Have you seen the video of, like, I guess it's Blue Origin or whatever the fuck, where it's Jeff Bezos and William Shatner getting off a space capsule. This is real, where they went into space. Jeff Bezos took William Shatner, elderly, like 80-year-old William Shatner, to space because he was like, well, of course I'm going to take William Shatner to space. I'm going to go on a joyride to space.
Yeah, he's been there
William
before.
Shatner to show off. So he takes William Shatner to space, and they get back down to Earth. This is all real. You can find this on YouTube. They get back down to Earth, and they're getting off this fucking space capsule. And this reporter is talking to William Shatner, who's a piece of shit, by the way, saying to this reporter, I got up there, and seeing the Earth from that perspective as one single thing, and truly seeing it that way, I thought I would feel joy, but instead I felt so much sorrow that I wept to think about how beautiful and precious this planet is and how we are treating it and treating each other. And as he's saying this to this reporter, Jeff Bezos in a fucking cowboy hat comes over and goes, woo, and starts screaming in his face and splashing champagne everywhere with a fucking supermodel being like, come here, and like totally interrupts the most heartfelt, meaningful thing that William Shatner has ever said or felt in his life. Just
incredible.
What a piece of shit. Anyway, Spawn had that moment, and now he's come back down to Earth, and we are learning that these are the musings of none other than Granny Blake. And as we turn the page, we see that she's here in the graveyard, and she says, to play off of, I know as much about anyone as anyone about living in darkness, but there are different kinds of darkness. And that gets into her talking to her dead husband's grave, her dead husband, Jack. I love this line she says here. She says, remember the time down on Charles Street? Oh, Lord, I thought my feet were going to fall off from all the dancing. And remember what you said to me that night? Mary Blake, keep dancing like that and the sun will be too embarrassed to come up. Which, I love that.
That's just fun. Also, Granny Blake, still one of the sweetest characters in the entire Spawn universe.
The Spawnoverse. I've said this in the Spawn community. I've said this a lot, but I'm a grandma's kid. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Like, I love a grandma, and I was always bonding with grandmas. And so I love Granny Blake. She's so sweet and philosophical, and she kind of just is like, well, Al's back from the dead now.
Yeah. I like that she just accepts it. I like her just willingness to accept this sort of like supernatural, because Al is speaking to her, right? So she can only imagine that he's back in some way, shape, or form, and she believes him to be an angel. That has become more real now, as we've kind of seen, as like almost a potential path for him as this Wings of Redemption Spawn. So that's kind of fun. It's good. It's great timing. This is why this is a great kind of follow up to 75. And I like what she says here. She says, that's one thing about the women in my family. We always knew a good man when we saw one. Cue Spawn appearing with his even more gigantic cape.
I love this splash. Dwayne Turner does a great job with it. I love the angel kind of like reeling back in the background.
Yeah.
I love Granny in the foreground. The coloring here really doing a lot of favors. The cape is kind of muted and everything, but this page, I feel like the colors in like Curse of the Spawn that we've seen with some of Dwayne Turner's work there would just be a mush.
Too like much brown and gray, and there's at least enough blue here to help offset things. And
it's very readable.
But yeah, Spawn is kind of not confessing, but sort of confiding in Granny Blake about what's kind of just happened to him, where he doesn't really know what it means. And he said that he's afraid that he's starting to forget things about his real life, things about Wanda. There's so much pain I never knew. How could any god ever allow this? This is what happens when you're like 13 and like something bad finally happens to you, and you realize that you shouldn't believe in God anymore because it doesn't make sense.
Spawn has fully undergone ego death at this point, is what this is. I think we had an extended conversation about ego death at one point before, that I think we left in the episode. But the prime, that's what you're talking about here, is the first time you do acid or whatever, and you suddenly can see how everything's connected. Oh my God. It's the same feeling that literally I was just talking about with William Shatner, where you can see Earth and you literally see it, and it's like, oh my God, it is just one thing. We're all one thing out in the vastness of this nothing. How can we be doing this to each other when we should just be the one thing? He also says here, he says, I can feel the world. I can feel the city like it's alive. I can feel your sadness. I followed it to you. So again, he's got this building connection where he's actually feeling the life and humanity of things around him, and not even just the humanity, but the worthiness of life and existence of things around him that he's never felt before. And remember, he's a trained killer. He's got to at least have some comfort in himself with the idea that lives end and deaths happen and that he can cause them. This might be the first time in his life he's experienced a level of compassion and understanding this deep.
I mean, I think that's his training is something that he really took to his training, right? They kind of beat that out of him
Yeah.
in sort of basic or whatever it
So
is, right? That he became desensitized to it. That's how he was able to become the world famous government assassin that he
that's it.
was, and
Right.
also that's why Malbolgia picked him, because Malbolgia was like, "Oh, good, perfect. You already killed that part of yourself, so I don't need to. I don't. There's no extra for me to have to do."
And so maybe it's not his first time feeling this, but his first time feeling this since he became that hardened killer,
Yeah,
you know? And I think that the weight of that really comes through with Spawn. Every time we see Spawn with Granny Blake, it's where we really get his rawest emotions, because he's not angry with her like he is with Cog. He doesn't expect her to have answers for him beyond just the emotional comfort she provides. And she seems to be the only human from his old life, Terry included, that he doesn't have an agenda with.
yeah. And also she just believes everything that's happened to him. So
She's
she
ready
is
to accept it.
right. She's able to be. She kind of runs down like, you lost a woman you love, you died, you came back, you found out she's married to someone else, she moved on. But you're like, she's just like, hey, I get it. This is all the stuff that happened, and Spawn is kind of like, he's worried about losing his humanity in the wake of his new role within the cosmos, essentially. And
Yeah.
this gives Granny Blake the opportunity to tell her a story about her own life, because she says to Al, for someone so bright, there's sure a lot you don't know about the heart.
Then she tells about her history with Jack. Now, I have two lines of thought on this.
Sure.
Very conflicting lines of thought. So I'll go with the nice one first. What we get next is an extended flashback sequence. It's very lovely. It's a flashback to the 30s or 40s when Granny Blake was just a young, we'll assume she's in her late teens, early 20s, probably early 20s, working in a diner. She meets her husband Jack. He comes into the diner. He's a gentleman to her. They call him Gentleman Jack because he's so kind. But she says it's no secret they were head over heels. The thing is, he is enlisted in the army, and he is one of the I guess it'd be the burgeoning Air Force or maybe the Navy at this point. I don't fucking care.
He's a Tuskegee Airman.
Yes, he's one of the Tuskegee Airmen. He goes to war in World War II flying these missions, and she has this whole moment where she's like sad that she fell in love with him, and he just says, "Don't worry, we'll be fine. I have faith." And of course, because he's a Tuskegee Airman, all of his missions were successes. They all flew home safely, and he comes home after the war, and their love flourishes. He becomes a lawyer, taking on corrupt mobsters in New York. In the course of that, he is assassinated. He's exploded in a car bomb that also blinds her. So through this sequence, it's I'm kind of skimming through a lot of the emotional beats in the sequence or whatever, but it's just a flashback, and it takes a few pages. It's very sweet. I really like the way it's rendered. I think the coloring is a little flat, but I think it works because I think it's very careful. And I think that Dwayne Turner's portrayal of these characters in this flashback is very lovely.
Yeah.
It's
lovingly
very nice.
rendered is
Yes.
is a phrase we've used many times before, and I would say that is very true of this.
We also understand from this that Granny Blake, why she has this connection to Al in particular as a serviceman, and why she is very committed to this idea that he was always doing good, much like her ex-husband, why she understands this idea of his sacrifice and everything, why they have this strong connection, because he's not unlike her husband Jack.
Right.
That said, this issue ends with her basically telling him that, yes, Terry gave you, or this sequence ends with her saying, yes, Terry gave Wanda a daughter, but Terry's not Wanda's soulmate like you are. And I know that because you're here beyond death for her. Therefore, you should just hold out in faith that this will all work out for the two of you and that somehow, some way, you'll be together again. And I want to say the other side of my opposing viewpoint here is that's some really fucking toxic reinforcement for Al at this point that he frankly doesn't need with Wanda. Given she doesn't know how bad he was when he was like, I'm going to go get Wanda back or whatever.
Right.
But you don't need someone in your life being like, hold out for your married wife to lose her husband. I know what she's saying here. And what happens next is she reinforces what she says through what happens next here. What she means is sometime in the afterlife, when everyone gets what they really, really deserve, you and your soulmate will be together again no matter what.
Right.
But fuck Terry.
Yeah. I do like, though, that Al does not really respond to that. He kind of just closes his eyes and kind of is curled up in his cape. And I think he's like he's still very much reckoning with, I think what she's saying, what he's always thought in a way. It's a different version of what he's always thought, but he's now having to reckon with the idea that, like, because she does say, you have to have patience. See, this life is a flicker, a heartbeat, and forever's a real long time. The reality being, if you're going to be together, you're not going to be together now.
Right. That's true. That's fair that Al may be hearing this a better way than I'm giving him potential credit for. I'm just thinking back to just a few issues ago where he was like, Terry, guess what?
Yeah.
I'm about to fuck your wife.
and Granny takes a moment to actually ask Al, because she's curious for her love, Jack. You know, what's it like? What's it like when you pass the other side, especially if you're a war hero? I bet they rolled out the red carpet, and we see Malbolgia, and he says, you know, it wasn't what I expected. I really can't tell you anything more. This gives Al an idea.
This is a very sweet little moment.
This rules. This made me love this issue.
This is the nicest thing Al Simmons has ever done, aside from curing Terry Fitzgerald's cancer.
Well, and it's a huge character growth moment for him in general, because we've talked about this before, but there have been plenty of people that he's tried to do right by, but he just did not have the compassion and the empathy to really help them in a meaningful way. And in this case, like, there's no dire straits here for Granny Blake, right? She's going to be fine for the most part. She's just old.
But what he does, the stakes here are that he decides that it's within his power to offer her a level of just true emotional peace.
Yeah.
And so what he does is he takes her to Rat City. He teleports her there. Thankfully, he doesn't make her walk through Rat City. When he first winds up on her in the graveyard, he's like, you shouldn't be out alone at night. And she's like, it's always kind of dark to me. And also, I know my guardian angel is here, which, you know, that's true.
Yep.
But he teleports her to Rat City to what he says is, she says, where are we? We're somewhere else now, aren't we? And he says, it's a special place, a kind of heavenly crossroads. It's called the Dead Zone. And she's like, I don't like the sound of that, which I don't know that I would have gone so far as to be like, this is the Dead Zone.
He could have just said it's a kind of heavenly crossroads. Left it at that. And he tells her not to worry. And we get her narration again. The next thing I know, I'm enveloped by the most incredible sensation, like being wrapped in electric velvet.
Yeah, and he says, walk forward. She moves out of his cape and into the place where we know his powers don't work.
Right. And she can see. And she's young, as we saw her in the flashback. And he just keeps telling her to head towards the light, head towards the light, head towards the light. And so she does. As she does, she steps through and she sees Jack again. And, you know, they have a great little moment. And he says, you know, eventually, though, the moment has to end. And he says, I have to go. And she says, I don't know how much time passed, a minute, an hour, a year. But Jack says to her, live your life, Mary. Make the most of the time you have. I'll be waiting for you. No matter what, we'll never be far apart. I'll be watching you from the skies. I love you, Mary. I always have, and I always will. Echoing the same things that he was saying to her, that we saw that he's said to her over the years in the flashback.
Yeah, they just have this like kind of ghostly dance in heaven or whatever. It's kind of like it's a very ghost kind of moment, actually, in a way, where she gets Patrick Swayze, she sees him at the end or whatever. Did you know that movie was directed by Jeff Zucker, who directed Airplane?
Really?
Yep.
All right.
Anyway, yeah, they get this beautiful moment, and he says, "I didn't realize you look just like Wanda." He warns her not to come closer, but she says, "I want to see what guardian angels look like while she still has sight, thanks to this heavenly miracle." And she says, "Al, you're beautiful." Of course, he's wearing his mask, thankfully.
Yeah.
And she kisses him and says, "Thank you, Al." And then she's back to being Granny Blake. And she says, "You just made an old woman very, very happy." And this is where she says, just have a little faith. You will be together in eternity. You'll have an eternity to spend with Wanda. Just have a little faith. And he says, "That's just it." And she says, "I know it's hard. True love always is. If it wasn't, everyone would do it." Which, I mean, that's true.
Little cliche, but that's okay. This is a very sweet issue, so
it's a cliche kind of
to,
issue.
Yeah, I'm willing to allow it. Well, it's a cliche kind of issue.
It's very touched by an angel again.
Which, that cuts to suburban Queens.
Spooky old suburban Queens.
Yeah, Cyan and Wanda are, dancing or playing or whatever, and suddenly they start floating. And Cyan says, "Look, Mommy, we're flying." But then they fall to the ground, and Cyan says, "It's him, Mommy. I think he's here." And they run to the door, and there's nobody there, but there is a rose on the ground. And Cyan says, "It was the sad man. I know it." And then we get one of the coolest panels in the whole issue to end the issue, and it's Spawn up in the trees like he always is, watching Wanda's house.
But just the way this is drawn in ink is
so
so
cool.
sick.
So cool. Very like Frank Miller. Cool. Like very like Sin City Frank Miller-y, but with these like this subtle blue.
Intricate. Oh. Yeah, it's just great. The way Spawn and the tree are interacting, the inking with the negative space.
Incredible.
Just fucking crushed it. The whole art team crushes this as like a capstone panel. And I'm so glad we don't get any dumbass talking heads after this, because it's just Spawn sitting in the tree and he's saying, "Whatever it takes, ... And spoiler alert for the next issue, he will pick up that sentence and we'll find out what he says. But for now, it kind of seems like he's reaffirmed a little bit of his faith that he'll have what he believes are his true just desserts with Wanda in the afterlife.
Yeah. Cool. So we're going to get into... So I only have issue 75.
Well, that's enough, Betty, because you had 74 too, and there's something very special about these issues.
We're going to get into the spawning ground and stuff first. It's pretty short.
Okay.
So spawning ground first, there's a message in the spawning ground. It says, "In September, we'll be shipping a new 4-issue miniseries about Harry Houdini, who appeared in Spawn 19 and 20. It's called Daring Escapes, and done in a cool classic comic style, written by our own Tom Warzakowski, Andy Grossberg, and penciled by artist Alan Weiss. Check it out and let me know what you think."
Listeners, should we try to find it and cover it? Let us know. Anybody give us 1 ounce of positive
If one person
reinforcement
says
to do
cover
that.
it, then we'll cover it. Spawn does appear in it technically, so
it's not canon.
No.
We'll cover it. We'll figure it out. But if that's something that would be funny, please just, you want to hear it, let us know.
Okay, so first, here's the first letter. "Dear Todd, okay, I'll get straight to the point." Good, because most of the letters are very long and not to the point. "What the HE double hockey sticks is going on? Ever since issue number 67, you've gone into some kind of slump. I'm sorry, but 67 sucked bad, and I know others will agree with me. This whole dead zone thing, I mean, if this place has always existed, then why didn't Angela use it to lure Spawn into a trap? It doesn't make any sense. The lesson here is to think more about the effect of which small factors can have on the storyline. Go back to the characters everyone loves. You can bring back Clown if you want. Hint, hint. We haven't seen Win in forever, or Tony Twist. Also, Sam and Twitch's humor seems to be drifting into the darkness. My suggestion is to go toward this pacifier idea more and seek Granny or something." Ironic.
Well, Wish granted, bitch.
I'm sorry, but that's not my worst complaint. I have to say one word to describe it. Vampire? I'm sorry, but how utterly corny and last-leggish. What does that mean?
I think it means he's saying the book's on its last legs, like
fair.
the last ideas.
Don't you have any better material? I don't know what is going through your head, but you seem to be painting yourself into a corner with this one. I mean, can't you try something else, or were you on vacation and decided to slough off a little?
Slough off means like if you have a necrotic disease, your skin will slough off.
I know what it means. It is not spelled SLUFF.
Oh, no, that's weird.
On a more positive note, I've seen the pictures of the heap for issue 73, and that sounds like a good idea. You don't need some dumb vampire story to boost ratings.
Yeah, I agree.
Anyway, other than issues 67 to 71, I love your work, and in fact, I wrote a paper about your comic book for one of my college classes. The fact is, I don't hate this book, or you for that matter. I just don't like this comic to give anyone places to bash it, including me. That's why I'm sorry you have to hear this, but get with the program. You're better than this. You're the best. Don't cut yourself short. From a big hockey fan, Rich Heitman, Kokomo, Indiana.
Wow, way down in Kokomo.
Yep.
Past the Florida Keys. I agree with Snrub. I have to say, now I will say I don't mind the Dead Zone idea, and I think the idea here is that like there are heavenly forces mounting there, what with Bootsy and stuff, but it is a little bit of a jump. And I did hate Wolfram. I think like, but these are Heaven's Vampires. Heaven's Vampires is the worst band in your town. Like,
especially because that issue ends with that little kid just having a Spawn logo on his stomach.
Because it's like the mark that says it's the inverted Spawn logo. That's like the mark of heaven that they're allowed to walk alone.
To that point, is that the child? That Bootsy's talking about? We'll find out.
I literally don't know, Pierce, so don't.
Todd says, it seems that people have some strong opinions as to the direction of this book, so let's see if I can give you some idea of what we do. You're saying that the story from 67 to 71 is not to your liking, but let me tell you what the biggest problem that I have when moving forward with Spawn each year. The stuff that interests me personally is the big idea stuff, and that stuff is like, what is the existence of all things that we have here on Earth? All the things that we have in our life, such as love and hate and war and peace and good and evil. And where does that all come from? And why did each one of us decide to go down certain paths in the course of our lives? The actual backstory to that is two people standing in a room, i.e. Cog and Spawn, are having a big, long conversation about the meaning of life. Unfortunately, when I start to go down that avenue, I just get as many letters saying, Todd, why are you doing stories that don't have enough action? However, it looks like from your comments, you rather have more drama than pure action, and the action is slowing down the forward progress. Let me see. Then he basically just says, like, listen, the Dead Zone's an Achilles heel for Spawn. It's just another problem that he's got to deal with. Like, Angela doesn't know about it because, like, heaven is this giant thing. So, if you work at a big company, Division A doesn't always know what Division F is doing. So that's just all it is. She doesn't know what Bootsy's up to. She didn't even realize maybe that Bootsy was an angel. So don't worry about it. Don't worry about the vampires.
We've seen the hierarchy of heaven hiding one hand.
Yeah.
Like, that is actually quite common for what we've seen in terms of how heaven operates. So,
but he ends with, in the future, we'll be going back to some of the key characters that you wanted and make sure that we keep this universe fairly tight. Also, we'll make sure that we're not sitting in the same kind of story ideas for the next 300 issues. Funny, because very recently the Dead Zones have returned. In my mind, that's when it'll get boring. I'm just trying to create these ideas that I can expand on and show you that by issue 100, Spawn is in the same comic book as issue 1, and by issue 200, Spawn is in the same comic book as issue 100. Thanks for your patience, and I'll try and get with the program.
Great. That's great.
So that one's fun. You know what? I will say that Todd's doing a decent job of making sure that Spawn by issue 1 is not the same as Spawn at issue 100. So yeah. The other back matter thing that I have is quite literally back matter, as it is the back issues of Spawn 74 and 75.
The back covers line up together to form the album cover of Korn's Follow the Leader.
Pretty cool. It does look like little Greggy appears. from Spawn 39, because these are nightmare children again.
Is that a Todd? Did Todd draw that, or was it Capullo and
It's
and
Capullo
McFarlane?
with Todd inks.
That's what I thought. Okay.
Yeah.
Boy, that just grounds me in a very immediately tells me exactly where I was. I was in 10th grade. My hair was awful. It was long with an undershave, like terrible. I would pull it back into a ponytail like the stepbrother in the worst movie you've ever seen. Wow, I just immediately grounds me in a time and place for where these issues came out. This is another story I've probably told on the podcast before, but if not, you guys are in for a treat. When I was in high school, I was in a band. I won't say the name of the band. They later changed the name and went on to become a relatively successful metalcore band. They were signed to Trustkill for a while in the mid 2000s. But when I was in the band, the guitarist had a Korn tattoo. It's just the Korn logo. But because his dad would not have let him got a tattoo, he got it as a tramp stamp so that he could hide it. So he literally just had a Korn logo tattoo as a tramp stamp right above his ass. Oh, I have no fucking idea. I know that he is married now and seems to have a fine life, and that's great. All those guys have kind of gone different ways, so whatever. But yeah, that is just such a funny, weird personal memory to me of when that came out. And of course, the Eddie Vedder dedication was because he directed the
so that's going to come up.
Right?
There's a letter. One of the letters says, "I've heard you're doing the cover for Korn's Follow the Leader. Do you have any other small projects worth knowing about?" And Todd says, "You're absolutely correct. Greg and I did the album artwork for Korn's latest album. I was at a couple of signings with them when they were doing their promotional kickoff for the album. We'll run some photos in the blah, blah, blah column. It was very interesting to see the crowd that follows Korn face to face for the first time and get a chance to meet them. The signing we had in Phoenix combined my fans and Korn's fans and ended up being a small riot, just like Korn had at almost every one of their 15 stops across the country." I like that he can't stop being a salesman. Like, he's even just being a salesman for Korn now.
Right. It's honestly very Stan Lee-ish in a way.
Totally. Also, for those of you who watch music videos on TV, we just finished the animated Pearl Jam video for the song Do the Evolution. It's their first video in over 5 years. And we've got some other things that we're doing in the music industry. I'll let you know right here when those come up. I watched the Do the Evolution video. It sucks. That song is, well, the video is fine, I guess, but the song is bad.
Yeah, the only thing I remember from it is "That's Evolution, baby."
That's basically the chorus. The co-director on it is one of the... so Todd is one of the directors, and the other director worked on Batman the Animated Series.
Oh, well, I mean, the animation in it is fucking awesome. I like
Some of
the
it's
animated
okay.
part of it. You know what? I'm going to go ahead and qualify that and say, when I was in 10th grade and that came out, I thought the animation was fucking awesome.
There's parts where you can see like Todd's influence that I'm like, oh, that part looks sick, because it looks more like Spawn the Animated Series. And then there's just like generic cavemen and dinosaurs, and you're like, oh, this sucks. And also the song is so bad that like you probably put on a song that you like and then watch the video to figure out if you like the animation.
I'll tell you, I am not a Pearl Jam fan at all. Not even a little bit.
No, me neither.
Just that's music. Okay. That's music that was popular when I was in high school, of course, and middle school. And I just thought it sounded like someone's grandpa at the time. As I've gotten older, it hasn't felt younger.
Not a Pearl Jam fan either. Don't get it. Don't understand at all. Anyway.
Hey, but much respect. Eddie Vedder, come on the podcast.
Yeah, you're in a Spawn. If anybody who appears in a Spawn issue, whether a letter writer or a dedication, you're allowed to be on the pod. So
yeah, at least once.
Final thoughts on 75 and 76. We got the finale to the Green World introduction, and then we got this little kind of denouement with Granny Blake as we kind of launch into, now we're hurtling towards 100 for sure. That definitely feels like the case.
So my final thoughts are 75 felt like a nice actual milestone issue. I like that we can immediately see the consequences on Spawn as a character and Al Simmons as a character. I like the way it set up new stakes and new ideas. And in terms of 76, I liked the nice, peaceful denouement for Spawn. It was nice to have a really beautiful moment for Al Simmons where he got to do and feel something other than just his horrible, hellish despair. So I think it was a really fun two-parter, especially as the back half of the story set up in 73 and 74. In terms of quarterly milestone issues, 25, 50, 75, I think this is the best one yet.
Yeah, I'd
And I
have to agree.
think we are solidly on the road to 100 now, both as a milestone, as the end of the second compendium, but also as a huge turning point for the story and world and characters of Spawn as a whole. So, yeah, I'm excited about it.
Yeah, I really like 75. I really think that it figures out a way to do what some of the milestone issues have done before, but in a much more truncated fashion. I understand that 100, I'm pretty sure, is double sized as well. But the fallout from 50 felt like it took really long and it went in directions that it didn't really need to go. And this was 75 is so much more impactful in terms of giving Al a clearer goal. He is still unclear on what he needs to do, but there
But
are now
the
there
stakes
are
are clear.
clear stakes. There's a clear understanding of like what happens if he doesn't figure out what to do. I like his sort of more evolved power set and like and as a result, personality. He is becoming more contemplative and less like a bull in a china shop with the way that he's handling things.
Mm-hmm.
I really like him going to see Granny Blake immediately after because she tends to recenter him
Yeah.
in a really effective way. And it's nice to see not only Todd and Brian Holguin key in on that and go, okay, right, a terrible thing just happened, and what's he going to do? He's going to go see the one person who doesn't piss him off or make him long for a life that he no longer has, right? So I think it's just really smart storytelling. I'm really excited for what comes next.
I think it's great. At this point, I just want to say, as we're moving into the stretch towards 100, we talk about the road to 75, the road to 50. We're now on the road to 100. We've done 76 issues of the core series. We've done a good chunk. We're closing in on having covered 100 Spawn comics at this point on this podcast. And it's also closing in on close to a year since almost exactly a year since we started recording at this point.
Yeah.
It's been a little less since we started releasing episodes. As you know, we record in advance, but I just want to say it's been an amazing journey so far. And every time we hit one of these milestones, it just feels so cool that we get to share this with each other, reading this really exciting comic, seeing a story like this, for example, where the creators are really learning lessons from what's come before in how they tell the story, and then the story is getting good as a result. It's really fun to share that and to talk about comics and stuff with you every week. And also, it's very gratifying and cool that we've got some folks that are along for the ride week in and week out. And sometimes we get to hear from y'all, and we like that too. So just, yeah, keep inviting new Spawnverts into the Spawn community.
Hell yeah. Speaking of those wonderful listeners of ours, what do you have as a recommendation for them this week, George?
You know what? I think we should all go listen to the New York Dolls. I was listening to them earlier today, and I think that's some good hot rock and roll. And yeah, so go ahead and listen to Fire Up Pills and tell me you're not rocking by the end of that song.
Hell yeah. I am going to recommend, I just watched it today. I'm going to recommend Steven Spielberg's first film, not his first theatrically released film. His first movie was a movie called Duel, starring Dennis Weber.
Yes.
It is basically Jaws with a truck, about a man getting chased by a truck on the highway. It's great. Had a lot of fun with it.
Progenitor for a predecessor for Maximum Overdrive.
Oh yeah, that too, and Christine in a way, I guess.
Yeah.
It's really fun. It's only like 87 minutes long, so the perfect length the movie should be. I'm sure some of our listeners listen to Blank Check. They're doing Steven Spielberg for the next 4 months, so early Spielberg. So get into it. I guess by the time this comes out, they'll be partway through their series. But hey, so my recommendation is Duel, and then my recommendation is also Blank Check because I love that show. Anyway, if you enjoyed the show, you can rate, review, subscribe on Google Podcasts, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you get your podcasts. You can send us an email at spawnographypod@gmail.com. Tell us if you like us or if you hate us or whatever. Nobody says they hate us, or at least not to our face. The reviews really help. Word of mouth really helps. That has been proven time and time again that just telling a few people about the show is great. If you want to follow us on social media, you can do so at Spawnography or at Spawnography Pod, right? That's YouTube, Instagram, Blue Sky, where I need to get better about posting. And yeah, that's pretty much it. If there's anything that you want, if we're not covering, we're covering all the stuff that we find relevant. However, if we're not covering something that you really love and you want us to cover it, you have to let us know. So leave it as a comment, leave it as send an email, whatever it is. We're open to even covering Daring Escape if someone says so. Anyway, George, for Todd's the love of the world,
he gave his only begotten spawn.
See you later, Hellspawn.
Spawnography!